So hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us tonight. For those of you who just joined, welcome. During a quick talk and the interactive speaker panel tonight, we will cover how to build real UX work experience and an awesome portfolio so you can actually land that first UX job. We have invited some awesome guests who have successfully done that, and they transitioned into the field, landed UX jobs, and they will share some insights from their journeys with you and answer your most pressing questions. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael. I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. It's a part-time UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their jobs. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just to give you some background and for credibility purposes, we run many cohorts and helped over 120 people or so get hired into UX roles. So let me just bring up some slides really quick. So basically, here are some of the companies that the grads were hired by that I was talking about. So we've seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition, and you also get an opportunity to learn from some of them today. A few quick housekeeping items. As we discuss this topic with our guests tonight, we'll pause a couple of times during the event to take some questions, and we'll also take more questions after the panel as well, as we'll love to make, as I mentioned before, our events as interactive as possible so you guys can participate in this live discussion. Starting with the end in mind, right? So understanding where exactly you need to get to become that highly hireable candidate and how exactly you'll get there, right? Again, it sounds very common sense and very simple, but you'll be surprised how many people miss this completely and do not really do that, right? So essentially, you want to UX this whole career transition journey and think from the standpoint of an employer, okay? The new way, right? So basically, you want to become a candidate who employers look at and think, this is definitely someone who can solve their specific problems and hit the ground running and bring value to our company. And they need validation and proof that you can actually do that, which they look for when recruiting and evaluating your application. So here's a quick overview of the key competencies you need to gain. We'll explore these areas in a bit more detail in the following slides. Okay, so just to summarize those, right? So hard UX skills, softer skills, real experience, 3+ case studies usually. And again, we'll cover this in a little bit more detail, and especially in much more detail during the actual discussion. Portfolio that shows the case study, skills and experience, resume and online presence, UX interviewing and storytelling mastery, and mastery of effective UX job search strategies. So how do you actually come up with these various competencies, right? So definitely not out of thin air. So here's what we did. Interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates, identified who had the most success in getting hired faster and why, interviewed 30 employers and hiring managers to understand what they're looking for, analyzed job postings to identify typical employer requirements, ran over 50 events, probably over 80 by now, with both candidates and employers, interviewed them and gained insights on what works best, right? So we basically used the UX process and did a ton of research to identify the key roadblocks that people experience in this transition journey and gain insight on what is needed in order to gain a better way to solve these problems and make this transition effectively, right? Then we synthesized all this research and identified some common themes. And again, one of the key takeaways is just starting with the end in mind and clearly understanding what you need to achieve to be really attractive to employers so you can actually get hired and not just learn a lot of stuff and then get stuck, okay? So let's just break it down really quick into by using this simple framework, right? So you know where you need to be, right, from that earlier slide. Now let's explore a simple framework for how you can actually get there, right? So here's a high-level overview. First, you learn the essentials, right? Foundations of UX, key principles and theory and concepts, the UX process itself, main methods, deliverables and tools. So typically, this is the most straightforward phase. Okay, after that, we go to the next major phase, practice and grow. So this is probably the longest and practical phase where most of your real learning, skill, and experience building will take place. This phase is mostly about applying, practicing, learning things in more depth in the process, and in the process, advancing your skills and building real experience. Okay, the next phase is about creating all the search assets, as we call them. This essentially involves packaging and presenting all the skills and experience in an effective portfolio, resume, and online presence. So key phase necessary to position yourself as an attractive candidate for your job search. Okay, and the final phase is search prep and execution, which involves learning and mastering effective search strategies, the UX interviewing process prior to kicking off your search. Okay, we found that a lot of people really like the product analogy or service analogy. So the first two phases are actually quite similar to building a product, and we call them learn and build. And the last two phases are very similar to marketing and selling of that product. So that is how we refer to this stage. So essentially, the first big mistake people make is they do not build a great product that is attractive to employers, which means you do not develop your skills sufficiently, or you do not have any experience. And if the product is great, it will be very hard, if not impossible, to market and sell it, right? So even if your product is great, even if you're a master marketer. The other big mistake people make is after building an amazing product, they do not devote much effort to really understanding what marketing and sales is all about, understanding the science behind it. They think that just having the skills and experience is enough, and it's just a matter of applying to tons of jobs, right? Meaning they do not really understand any of the science behind the marketing and sales, which means they do not put enough effort in order to position themselves as an attractive candidate, and do not learn what effective search strategies are and how to navigate the hiring process successfully. And if you do not do that, you can also get stuck looking for jobs for a very long time if you get there at all. Okay, so on this slide, you can see how the key competencies you need to gain map nicely into this transition journey. Again, we like to keep things simple, right? So you can just use this basic roadmap and still guide yourself through this transition. Again, you'd be surprised, even though this seems simple, how many people totally miss this and kind of go a little bit backwards about this whole transition and get stuck for months or years. So you see on this diagram when you can attain which competencies, and this is essentially a high-level view of what you need to have to be a highly hireable candidate and when you can attain that. Okay, so quick summary for this step, right? So starting with the end in mind, understand where exactly you need to get to be that highly hireable candidate by potential employers and how you will get there. Ensure you have a solid product before selling, otherwise you can waste months or even years in some cases. Once you have that solid product, it is key to learn, practice, and apply the principles and best practices behind the marketing and sales in order to get hired faster, okay? And finally, do not confuse what phase you're in. Understand where you are and what may be blocking you from making progress, and focus on what is most important at that particular moment. So do not spread yourself too thin by doing too much at one time, and because that will yield very little progress. Okay, so it is key to build yourself up and become a candidate that employers really want to hire before kicking off your search. So now let's briefly explore how you can accomplish that goal, specifically by gaining real experience and building strong portfolio case studies. So again, we'll give you a few quick concepts and then bring the speakers back so we can actually discuss this and learn from their specific experiences. So the reason many of you attended this event, right? So as you may know, real experience is absolutely key. You want to show that you have real experience because, I mean, it's listed in pretty much almost any job description, even entry-level ones. Companies want proof that you have done it in real life and can hit the ground running, and that's why experience is so important, right? If you have done it for someone else, in their eyes, it drastically increases the chances of you being able to do great work for them. So a couple of mistakes related to this. One mistake is just not building any real experience and trying to market yourself to employers, right? However, this is not your fault, as this is the typical conventional way we're told that we're supposed to start a career for some reason. I've spoken with quite a few folks being stuck for this reason. They just keep applying and sending their resume for months or if not years. And sometimes they may get some interviews, but usually almost never get to actual job offers. And one of the common reasons given is that we're looking for someone with a little more experience, which you may have heard before. Another mistake is overdoing hypothetical projects and thinking it will get you hired, right? So while doing some student passion and solo hypothetical projects can be useful. Doing only such small projects and doing too many of them is not likely to get you very far. These can be good for preparing for interview design challenges, for example, or just practicing your skills. Those typically won't be that useful for your actual portfolio or experience building. So you want to look as professional as you can when you're looking for work. And some people may get away with just hypothetical projects in their portfolio, but you will have a very hard time competing and get stuck for months or even years in some cases. Okay, so the good news is that having a full-time job in the field is not the only way to gain that experience, and you can solve that the no job without experience and no experience without a job catch-22 problem. So volunteering and pro bono consulting, it may, here are some options. Basically, I'll give you a little bit more guidelines and then jump over to the panel. It may just be hard if you're just starting out because you're very new and the organization you help may not know much about UX either, but it's still doable, just requires initiative, motivation, and strong communication and persuasion skills. Internship. So this can be tricky because the good ones where you will actually do interesting work, get mentorship and grow can be as hard to find as actual jobs sometimes. Often these are mainly reserved for students, but it is possible. So just be aware of tons of internships where you just do menial or very narrow tasks and you will not really grow and get valuable case studies. So we'll cover this in a bit more detail as well. Okay, and some other options are freelancing as well as entrepreneurship, right, in some cases. All right, so here are some tips. A few quick tips to ensure this could actually work well for you, right? You do not have to quit your job to build real experience, right? Doing it part-time is totally fine and will still look great on your resume. It is important that you can provide value to the organization because otherwise, if they do not have to pay you, it may not be worth it because it may be a huge, even if they do not have to pay you, because it may be a huge investment of time from their side. So you cannot just come in and expect them to spend a ton of time and teach you if your skills are totally lacking. So you can provide much value, right? So before trying to do this, learning essentials and picking up some skills is definitely important. You're benefiting from this work and relationships much more than you would from doing a hypothetical project. So appreciate the opportunity and aim to provide a ton of value within reasonable limits, of course. If you do well, you're likely to build a great relationship, get strong referrals for the future, or they might even hire you themselves. Ensure that the work is also highly beneficial for you, on the other hand, right? So on the other hand, it's also key for you to manage this engagement effectively and ensure the work you do is highly beneficial to you. So you're working on interesting, challenging, and sizable project. So it's not just 2 days long or something like that, covering many phases. So it covers many phases and areas of the UX process. This is a must because the work does not provide with great experience and case study, right? If the work does not provide you with great experience and a case study, you're much better off finding another project, right? That does provide that. This is actually the advantage of volunteering and or pro bono work, or overpaid work, right? You have much more leverage in shaping your project, and company cannot just boss you around as much and limit what you do as much as they could if they actually hired you and were paying you lots of money. So you provide value and work pro bono, so you have more say in shaping the project. So like covering different phases of the UX process, setting your own hours. This is very important, and you have to make sure that project is sizable, covers various phases of the process. Always think how the work will ultimately look in your portfolio and what employers may think. Okay, confirm in advance confirm in advance in the writing what you can actually showcase in your portfolio. Right, this is very important, and so many people got burned by it by doing lots of work and then realizing they cannot showcase any of that. So you do not want to waste your time, and actually, you want to make sure you get the benefits that you're looking for. So some quick common mistakes related to case studies. Thinking that one course or a hypothetical UX case study will get you hired because you have other design experience or supposedly you already have the skills. Usually this does not happen. There are exceptions, of course, and some folks may get lucky, but that is an exception, not the rule. The exception is usually if that case study is one real and large project, right? So if you were like working with a real company for like a year or something like that, right? In that case, there could be an exception. Another one is thinking the more the better and showcasing too many small case studies, right? So doing a lot of UI only projects that do not cover any other UX process phases. So UX is not just about visual or UI design, right? So while doing a ton of tiny projects might help you improve your skills or prep better for interviews, if you do it right, it will not be very useful for the actual case studies for your portfolio typically. So here are some tips as well, and then we'll jump over to the panel. Have at least 3 case studies. So 3 is usually the magic number. A lot of people ask, like, how many case studies should I have to be able to get hired? Again, we've done lots of research in this area and interviewed hundreds of people who went through this journey. Usually the consensus is that you need at least 3. Ensure your case studies are sizable, right? So each at least a month or better, 2 or more in duration. This is a bit subjective, of course, depending on how much work you're putting in daily or weekly, etc. So this is just a ballpark. So essentially, you need to ensure that the projects are sizable and not just something you did at a day-long hackathon, right? Larger projects will also look much better on resume or LinkedIn when recruiters or hiring managers are evaluating you later. And ensure every case study covers at least a few phases of the UX process. Again, I'm not talking about small design exercise that you'll need to practice for the interviews or practice skills, but the actual projects that you'll have as a case studies in your portfolio. Okay, so coming back to real experience for a second, so try to have at least 2 projects with real clients. While we could simply try to cheer you up and say, yes, just complete a basic UX course with a hypothetical project and you're good to go, we prefer being more honest and transparent here. You already know how most companies and open roles require candidates with experience. So same thing applies here. To avoid wasting a ton of time and trying to market yourself while your product is not that great yet, getting this real experience one way or another could really help you. So this can really speed up your job search. The more real client work you can show, the more professional experience you will look, and you want to be able to stand out among your competition in the job market. Collaborate with a team. This is really important because tech is a team sport, and working with a team is quite different and much more challenging than working by yourself. So you want to demonstrate that softer but critical skills to employers and prove that you can do that effectively on your resume and on your portfolio, and then talk about it in interviews. Document everything thoroughly while you're working. So this is absolutely crucial. If you don't document what and how you're doing as you go, creating your portfolio and writing case studies will be much more painful and take several times longer because it'll be hard to remember like what you did, when, why, and how. So save yourself some time and avoid that headache and document as you work on the project. Okay, awesome. So hopefully you got some valuable tips from this. Now let's go to the most fun part, actually interviewing and getting some insights from the folks who have recently successfully made this UX career transition. So I'll facilitate the discussion, might occasionally have to interrupt to ensure we're on time and have a chance to answer most of the questions and give the audience a chance to ask plenty of questions. Also, every speaker does not have to answer like every single question. Just feel free to pick ones you feel you may have the most insights on. For the audience, if you have questions, again, please use the Q&A tab. This way, you can also upvote others' questions, and we make sure that we address the ones you're most interested in. And please also try to let us know which speaker the question is for. Just a reminder, the Career Transition Roadmap Summary handout will be available to download. So stick around if you'd like to get that. Okay. So overall, we'll mostly discuss this practice and grow phase that you guys have just seen, and then search asset creation phase as well of this career transition journey that we just covered with you guys. And obviously focusing primarily on work experience and portfolio case studies. All right, so let's get it going. So why don't you guys briefly introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your background? Anyone can jump in.
I could go first.
Awesome.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Lacey. I was a previous BeginX student. I love the program, so I'm biased, but it was really successful for me. But before BeginX, I worked in learning experience design. So it had some overlap with UX design, but it was more focused on e-learning, and it didn't really use a design thinking process, and it wasn't as methodical as UX design was. So now, after graduating BeginX, I was able to get first a contract position with Dell and then hired on full time after that, which was really great in a product designer role. So that's mainly me. I have 2 dogs. I don't know if you want like some fun facts. I have a lot of these little pop dolls. I don't know if anyone likes Pokemon, but all right, someone else go.
Awesome. I think fun fact is a great idea. So whoever goes next, feel free to tell us some fun facts as well.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Joanne Romero, and actually I was in the same cohort as Lacey and Jenny, and it's so nice to be able to see their faces again and catch up. It's really nice. And hi, Maggie. We haven't met, but hi. So I started off as a fashion designer. I worked for many years in fashion design, women's wear, and then I just found one day that I was a little bored. I felt that there was bigger and better things out there that I could design and really make an impact on, other individuals, right? I enjoy design overall, but I also like the critical part of it and figuring out solutions to a problem because it makes you feel so productive. That's what I like. And also, I have one of those little fun pops. And I have 3 cats. So, continuing with the animal theme, the pet theme. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I forgot. The big thing. So I am working as a strategy designer at Bank of America. And gosh, I can't, it's such a great, amazing feeling to be able to work with a, group of people that are professionals. And there's just so much learning that I've been able to do and grow as a designer. So it's really exciting. I love learning. And I think part of UX is learning, searching, open-mindedness, and being able to collaborate with the team. So yeah, I'm very happy that I made the decision to come to BeginX and get that real work experience, which threw my resume to the top. And also my portfolio as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I can go next. Hi, I'm Jenny. Like Lacey and Joanne said, we're in the same cohort, so really nice to see them again. And hello, Maggie. So my name's Jenny. I'm currently a junior UX designer at Digital Room. It's an e-commerce website. But previously, I worked as a UX designer at a health tech called Ampost Mobile. I recently jumped to this new company just because I'm an international student, so there's some visa issues. If you're an international student, you know what I'm talking about. My background is I used to study communications design at Pratt Institute, an art school in NYC. So my major is kind of like a abstract graphic design, and I actually I really want to do UX and UI back that time, so I decided to join BeginX. And then for me, I actually feel like it's really successful. I actually already recommend this to 3 of my classmates. They want to transfer to UX, and then 2 of them already enroll and then finish it. And I mean, it's really great that I can jump into UX industry. Like Joanne said, really there's a lot of knowledge coming out every day. In my previous company, I do both UX and UI, but now I'm only focused on UX, so it's quite different. So yeah, I'm gonna share with you later after the questions part. Yeah, I'm gonna pass over to Maggie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Brown, and I was also in a BeginX cohort, not the same as these three, but it was January 2020, so I will never forget wrapping up our case studies virtually. Crazy time, but also very valuable. My background is in public health, so I am proof that you can come to UX design from pretty much anywhere. But what got me interested in UX design was that I did research in patient experience and designing healthcare systems around patients and how incredibly important that is, and how it was somehow novel in the healthcare industry pretty recently. And yeah, did BeginX, got a job at a very scrappy startup and scrambled to do everything UX and UI, and then moved over to iCrossing, which is where I currently am a UX designer. And I love it. It's a digital marketing agency. So we focus exclusively on creating better experiences, and we have lots of access to different research resources. So very happy where I landed.
Yeah, thank you guys. And Maggie was actually in the cohort when we used to run everything in person, right? Run the program in person. And she was in a cohort when the pandemic started. And then we had a plan on the roadmap for like the virtual version of the program to launch at some point, and basically we just had to implement that roadmap right away on the go. And also wanted to highlight, so as you guys may have noticed, all these folks are our grads, right? But obviously this event tonight, right, is not about BeginX, right? Even though we can tell you more about it later. But we're going to explore their stories, and we're going to explore what they actually did, to make this transition, and what tips and insights they can share with you guys. Okay, so to take a step back a little bit and start with a bigger picture or end in mind, so to speak, right? Like we were saying earlier, to make your job search effective, right? It makes sense to first find out what employers are really looking for in UX candidates, right? And then make yourself an attractive candidate. So in your opinion, what do you think are the top 3 most important things that define that attractive candidate?
I could go first again. I think, at least in my experience, I don't know if anyone had the same experience, and just from what I've heard working at Dell, having a cross-disciplinary background is very attractive. So I don't think all companies function this way, but some companies are always looking for a culture add instead of a culture fit, and they want to hire someone who's unlike anyone else on their team. So to be able to somehow integrate a cross-disciplinary background into your portfolio, that maybe in finding a way to connect it to UX is one thing that I think it really sets you apart from other people who don't have that type of background, or don't, like, for example, with Maggie, she has a healthcare background, patient experience. I'm sure that really set her apart from other people. Something else, I think, with a portfolio, when you're creating your case studies, to just make them care right away. Don't, dawdle to get to the point. I know it's hard not to tell the whole story from beginning to end, and it takes a while to really get to the good stuff. But just right at the top, just, put exactly why they should care. Like, what was the problem? What was the solution? What you did in a summary. This is personally what I think. And then you can go into more detail after that. And I also think that a portfolio should have good UX design, because that reflects on you, make sure your portfolio has good UX design.
Thank you, Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
I can go next. I think, like Lacey said, definitely when the company trying to hire some, especially your entry-level designer, they're actually trying to seeking what kind of diversity you have. Like, my last company is like a healthcare company, and they hire lots of people with a healthcare background. So if you're have a relevant background or experiences, that may be a huge benefit. And also for the portfolio, I personally feel like even though visual is definitely important, I know some hiring managers, they really care about the visual, but I heard lots of hiring managers say they really care about the storytelling. Try not to work through all your step, like, because we all know that step, like research, survey, and then starting wireframing, hi-fi, but they actually want to know that what caused the problem, and then they want to know why you decide to create this function. So try not to use all the same template, but really focus on why you're trying to solve this problem and then why you create these features. And then the other thing about storytelling is I know there's a map. It's called storytelling plot structure climax. It's like from exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and then resolution. And then when you doing your portfolio, try to find your climax, or some people say aha moment. If I give example, it's like in my previous portfolio, I actually do have like a climax. It's like we really have a great difficulty about designing one design solution, and then we discuss back and forth, talk to stakeholders, and then have a lot of iteration. So I can consider that a climax, and I know some hiring managers, they really like to see those things, especially when you encounter some difficulties, and then they want to see how you're gonna solve that problem, even you have difficulties. So don't afraid to put your difficulty or blockers inside your portfolio. Yeah, that's my suggestions.
Thank you, Jenny.
Hi. So Jenny was talking about, the presentation and the storytelling. I'll tackle it from the other side. Make sure that, and this was told to us in the beginning, is document everything. And at first I was like, what do they mean? Like, I don't understand what that means. Write any thoughts, comments, situations that come up, and make sure that 3 months later, when you come back to your portfolio and you're reworking your study and you're really putting it together, you go back to those notes, because then you're going to say, that's right, that's why we did that, because you're going to forget, right? There's going to be so much that you're going to learn. You're going to feel overwhelmed, and that's okay. We all felt the same way too. But definitely keep good documents. And in terms of what employers are looking for, they're actually looking for that as well. They want to make sure that, in case you need to go back and you need to be able to check against decisions that were made in the company, that you're able to back that up, right, with data and just your documentary that you have. Something else that I feel might be strong that employers are looking for is having a real passion for problem solving. So if you can talk about how that's important to you and how important it is for you to be able to make that change within that company for the particular user. Now, remember, we are designing for the user. We're not the user. So that's really another big thing to focus on and emphasize in terms of what they're looking for. And, in Bank of America, we have a lot of great individuals with a lot of different varied backgrounds. And, when you have variation in experience, we see it as a plus. We see it as a strength, right? Because we can rely on each other for something that we don't know. So don't feel like because you don't come from UX or for a computer background that's going to be a negative thing against you. It's not. You should bring, your experience forward and see how you can use it to make their company better, their user experience better.
Thanks, Joanne.
I 100% agree with everything that's been said. I think what I can add as far as qualities that hiring managers are looking for, number one, obviously, is you need to be able to show that you're a team player. But I think everyone knows that. That's kind of a standard. But aside from that, I think things you can show are like curiosity. UX is also a very rapidly evolving field. So if you can demonstrate that you keep up with the times, that you read the latest resources, that you're interested in articles, if you can point out like, hey, I recently read about or took a course on the UX of AR and VR, right? Because that is kind of the future of UX right now in a lot of ways. I think that would be one quality that you can highlight.
Thank you, Maggie. And by the way, it's great that I already see lots of questions popping up in the Q&A tab. So what we'll do is we'll go through a couple of questions first that we have prepared, right? And that might answer some of the ones that you guys are already asking. And then after that, we'll jump in and then take some questions that haven't been answered yet. And we'll do that a few times, actually, to make it, again, as interactive as possible. So here's the next question for you. If someone only has hypothetical student or passion projects in their portfolio, what do you think they should do? Start their job search anyway, or try to build real experience?
I think if you only have the own personal project, I actually still recommend having a real world project. Even though you can try to volunteer or find some pro bono work. I saw Brad was asking, how do you find the internship pro bono? For my experiences, because I do have like at least three volunteer and pro bono UX works. So my experience is like, one is angellist.com. There's a lot of startup there that are trying to hire UX designer pro bono. And then the others use LinkedIn, but do not trying to search the keyword like UX design unpaid, even though I know a lot of designers, they disagree with unpaid, they don't like it. But if you have zero experiences, I feel like volunteer is the first step. Or the third one is like trying to join some bootcamp, which have some real world client project. It is important just because it is so the personal project and the real world design project are so different. One is like personal project, just like a solo team player, and then usually we just want to design the work we want to design. Like I want to create a travel app, I want to create a I don't know, clothes changing app, something like that. But for real world project, there's a lot of things need to consider, like strategy, like teamwork, and then how to collaborate with all the stakeholders. And sometimes those are the things that hiring manager are looking for. I'm gonna pass to other speakers to see if there's other one to say.
Thanks, Jenny. It's good.
I'll add. So it's very important that, first of all, that you manage your workload and you figure out if you're taking on too much, right? So if you need to just concentrate on the course, that's good. That is your decision. And if you feel like you can pick up a little bit more, then that's great too. So really it depends on what you want to do. So one of the things that I did, right, to get more experience, I had experience in design, in fashion design, but I wanted to get experience in UX, right? So what I did was I was volunteering for an animal shelter at the time, and they were incredibly underfunded. So I remember one day I was just talking to the manager, and she said, I have this problem, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, wait a minute. I really want to help her. I want to be able to solve that problem for her. And, I set up a little draft and I presented to her and I said, how do you feel about making these changes on your website? I think these would increase interest and engagement and have more people come on and, be able to help you. So she said yes. We went ahead and did it, and I worked with actually another volunteer who happened to be a developer. So that was a really good experience. I didn't get paid, but that didn't matter because the fact that I had made a difference for her and her organization was payment enough. And obviously, I was able to put that into practice.
Thanks, Joanne.
Yeah, and just to add, also, I agree with everything that was said. And to reiterate, if you want to start your job search before having a real life project, I think you can, but just know that it might be a lot more difficult. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it, like Jenny said, there's so many different moving parts. Like, did you work with a team? That's very important. It's very different from doing something just on your own. What were the business requirements? Like, if you're doing something on your own, maybe you don't even really have business requirements. Like, how did you convince stakeholders that this is what's going to be done? All of those things are really important. That's a really important experience to get to be a UX designer, and you may not get that with a school project or something that you're doing on your own.
Thanks, Lacey.
Nothing to add here. I agree. You just need to find a way to get real life experience. One project, though, could be enough. Like if you work hard on it and you can really showcase it and you can demonstrate what you personally did instead of a team. We did this, we did that. Then I think it is possible, especially if you have a professional background before that, because what hiring managers are also looking for, I think, is just someone who knows how to work and be in a collaborative environment and thrive in that environment. And if you can show that and say, hey, here's this one real life project that I did really extensively, I think you get away with it. So, yeah.
Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, these are great points. So let's dig in just a little bit more into that. I know some of you already started touching on the difference on like what's the difference of real project versus hypothetical project. Let's dig in a little more. Like, what's the difference? What are the primary differences you think? Like, what makes a real project so different from student project or passion project?
I think one of the biggest differences are the blockers that you're going to run into and how you overcome them. Like, okay, we don't have funding, so we can't do that. How do we either get funding, or what's a solution that we can do that doesn't need this funding? Different things like that. Because it's when you're working on your own and you're creating a design, you don't really necessarily have to worry as much about like, hey, is this possible for a developer to do? Like having that real world experience, you can collaborate with developers. You can find out, like what is actually possible in what time frame. Like that's really important. But yeah, just in general, the different things, I think it's so important also in your case studies to talk about the blockers and how you were able to overcome them, because that really shows a lot, because almost every real life project is going to have some blocker in some form or another that everything can't just fall apart. You have to figure it out.
I guess at least for me personally, being able to talk about working with a tech team and handing off designs both to UI designers and to the people who are actually developing the product, that's a skill, and it requires a lot of finesse in being able to communicate what, for UI designers, what the important UX pieces are. This button it can be whatever color you want, but it can't be gray, because it's a UX best practice not to make gray buttons. People think that they're inactive, for example, or being able to just communicate with people who have different types of brains. Like a lot of developers have engineering minds, and being able to speak their language and communicate the value of UX, to advocate for your designs is something I think you can only do in a real, I guess, working with a real company or organization.
Thanks, Maggie. So let's, I see that Brad Wall asked a question that quite a few people upvoted, and that actually aligns quite well with the question I was going to ask next. So most employers, right, as you can see, right, they look for 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years of experience, even for entry-level jobs. Again, based on your background, you might have already started talking about this a little bit, but I want to explore this in a little more detail. What do you think are some good ways to build up real experience? So Brad is asking internships, pro bono work with the team, etc. So, and some resources, maybe some additional resources for getting that.
So if you take a look around and see, do you know anyone that has a website or anyone that's working on a particular product? You know, they might need help. So that's one way of offering your services and your experience. In this way, you can both, benefit from the work. I would say, read as much as you can and pick up books. For example, if you don't have the time to sit down and read, what I was doing is I would get Audible books. So if I was walking to the supermarket or to whatever, I was listening to books, right? Just to be able to get all that information as much as I could. And also, I would say there's an organization. So you can Google UX, let's see, opportunities to volunteer. There's something called Taproot, TAPROOT, where they work on really wonderful causes, to help humanity and help people in society. So that's one way of being able to get experience. I didn't do it, but I did join, and you have the opportunity to be able to work on something else with other individuals.
Thank you, Joanne.
I'll go now, I guess. I agree with Joanne to reach out to people, but I think a really great way to do that, to find people who might be working on a project that you could help volunteer to work on too, is join different communities. Like, go on LinkedIn. There's so many different LinkedIn communities related to UX that you can join. It's not even just limited to LinkedIn, probably all over social media. Someone once recommended Twitter to me as having a lot of great UX communities. I did not join Twitter. I couldn't get myself to muster up doing it because I already have too much social media, but that might be a great place that you guys would want to check out. Even Facebook has communities where you can pose questions like, hey, is anyone working on UX project for a product that they're really going to develop, or instead of something that's just like for fun, like something that you really want to like bring in and actually create a product for real users that we're going to interview. And I'm sure lots of people there would be happy to take extra help for their passion projects and their products that they want to work on. Also, internships are great, especially if you're already working in a big company. Sometimes they even have programs there that all you really have to do is ask or like inquire and try and find out. Even if you do have to go backwards a little bit, it's worth it, because it's kind of like, I think of it like a catapult. Like, you go backwards a little bit, but then you skyrocket forward once you get all of that experience. So maybe if you're already with a company, you can inquire about doing an internship, or just see if they have a program there that allows you to learn on a team. Or if you're not working with a big company that offers something like that, just going on, honestly, LinkedIn is my favorite for applying for jobs. Like, checking up internships on there and applying to internships there is a great way to try and get some work that way.
Thank you, Lacey.
Yeah, I like LinkedIn. And then also for those big company, I know they like Google or I don't know, Netflix has it, but I know Meta has it, Google has it. They always have a apprenticeship Now like an internship is for those who have non-UX experiences or non-design background, and then apply and then join them. There's a mentor to teach you. I know it's pretty competitive, but it's worth to give it a try. They have it every year. I know they actually have it recently in April, May. Yeah. And that's one. And then also I can recommend a community called ADP List. I know some of you might know it, and then they have a lot of mentor that works in the industry right now, and then they offer free advice for 30 minutes. Sometimes you can get connected with them. I used to connect with a Bloomberg senior UX designer by using that website, and then we eventually met in New York City and then grab a coffee, and then we still stay connected right now. So that was a great platform. Yeah, and also Slack has some community. I joined a community called UX Support Group. I can post a link later, and then they always have some, I don't know, like ask speakers, learn something, job fairy, a lot of channels there. So you can try if you can find some opportunity there. Yeah, that's my suggestions.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, I think you also answered some of the other questions here. I think Layla asked how to find a mentor, what criteria to use, how to ask for help. Maybe that could be something we could touch a little more on next. So what are your guys' thoughts on? I know it's like a step away from experience a little bit, but any tips on finding a mentor? And where I know, and Jenny mentioned ADP List, which is great, which is basically designed for finding mentors, right? It's very like something they're great, very good that they do. Any additional tips anyone has?
I used UXPA. They have chapters all over the country. They definitely have a New York City chapter, and they'll set you up with a UX designer. It's free, and I think they do it like twice a year, or maybe it's quarterly. But that's a pretty easy way to get a mentor, and having a mentor is really important, especially if you're trying to do design work on your own and build up your portfolio. You definitely want to run your ideas past someone with a lot of experience, but also it's accountability in a lot of ways. Like, at least for me, it was, I was like, okay, next week when we meet, I'm going to show you X, Y, and Z that I did. And it was just a little bit of fire to keep going and actually do the stuff on top of my day job.
Thank you, Maggie. So before we move on to the next question, any additional resources you guys want to mention for building up real experience for internships or pro bono volunteering? Anything maybe we haven't covered? Because I think maybe one or two of you haven't gone over that yet. So maybe if we missed anything, anyone wants to add anything?
Resources, no, but I really highly recommend to look at all those big tech's design page. I can post it because I do have a page that collect all those big tech companies' design page. Like Spotify, they have a spotify.design. Lyft, they have a design.lyft.com. Also Airbnb, Meta, Microsoft, they have their own design page. And I always feel free to check their articles that wrote by their design teams. You can learn a lot of like a hardcore knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, and I think you also mentioned AngelList before. So AngelList, it can be great for just finding startups that you can potentially help, just talking to accelerators maybe. Basically, you just need to be persuasive and go out there and talk to some companies and offer your services, even if it's pro bono at first, or if it's like a nonprofit, right? You just basically need to persuade them to collaborate with you and sell them on the value of UX work, so which is a great skill in itself as well. And ideally get a team as well, get a mentor. So it's a little harder. I mean, that's why we have the program, right? It's because we kind of have this whole system that you plug into and it accelerates you, right? But you can do something similar kind of on your own, right? It just can be harder and just take longer, but it's definitely doable and possible. So I also wanted to ask you guys about internships, right? So I know Lacey already started talking about that a little bit. In your opinion, how helpful are internships? Have you guys tried looking for those, and what are your thoughts on that?
I personally didn't end up doing an internship, unless you consider BeginX an internship, but I did apply to a lot of them. I know Microsoft had one where they had a whole bunch of different cohorts for design type internships. I don't know if they still do. I would imagine they do. I applied there. I'm trying to think where else. There were a lot of startups that had internships that I applied to. But a lot of, you'd be surprised at the number of big companies that have internship programs and ongoing cohorts like every year that you can apply to. It's just a matter of looking them up. Unfortunately or fortunately, they didn't work out for me, but then I did end up getting an entry-level position, which was really great. But I know Jenny has done an internship, so I'll pass it over to her.
Yeah, but unlike some students who graduate in like human-centered interaction program, they actually apply those big companies internship program. Because I do have some visa limitation back that time, the internship I apply is actually some startup or some startup company. So I actually joined like a small AI company when I was at school. I think I found that while LinkedIn, just like connect them while LinkedIn, and then just join and volunteer pro bono. But they say it's internship, it's like unpaid internship. I also use AngelList and then have a couple interview with some startup and also got some internship. But eventually I got like a junior entry-level job and I didn't go that. I feel like sometimes if you already have some experiences in other job, you can just start with entry level or try to start with entry level. The reason is because I know for the internship there are lots of students who graduate in design field. They are trying to catch up that position. It's really competitive, but sometimes entry level is not. I feel like it's not competitive as the internship. And especially if you have some real world experiences, even though it's not in UX, it's somewhere else like engineer or sales, you do have some working experiences that how to deal with the teams. I think maybe try some startup like 100 to 400 people startup. I think those are like easier than those big tech. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, I think the key difficulty about internship is that, as you mentioned, it can be basically as competitive as a job almost, if the internship is great, right? And as I touched on in the slides before, right? And then just beware of if you're exploring internships, and then the other difficulty is that it's only open to students sometimes, right? So, and just be careful with, especially if it's like unpaid, make sure that it's useful work for you, right? It's not just some internship with some company, right? And doing the work that is not, ensure that it's going to be useful for your case study, useful for your portfolio. You cover a few phases of the UX process, right? So it's not just doing a little small UI project. That's a mistake actually a lot of people make with freelancing, right? They just catch whatever they can. They make a few $100 doing some UI work, and then it may be useful to just practice your skills, but it can be not that useful for your actual case study in your portfolio. All right. Talking about volunteering and pro bono projects in a bit more detail. What are your guys' thoughts on that? And any tips related to that?
Well, I think as long as you have an open mind and you really want to explore this industry, I think you should be open-minded to doing pro bono, right? And as I mentioned before, if you have a neighbor, or if you have a friend, or even like a local business, like a florist or something, that you feel they might need the help of, enhancing their website, this is a great opportunity for you able to do it. So take a look around your neighborhood, see what kind of businesses might be able to benefit from that, and ask them. I think it's a great opportunity for you and for them. Obviously, it's free for them, and just make sure that you discuss the plan and what basically what kind of problem they want solved, which is really the UX design strategy. But yeah, so definitely look around your neighborhood.
Thank you, Joanne.
I think if you don't have any UX experience at all, then volunteering and pro bono work is the best way to go, because yes, it's unpaid. Yes, it's taking up your time. Yes, it's going to be hard work, but I can tell you it's so worth it, because from what I've seen, the UX industry is booming. And once you have that experience, and once you have an impressive case study, like Maggie said, maybe even just one, although 2 or 3 is better. Once you have that, then you're gonna eventually get to the point where recruiters are reaching out to you. And you don't even have to, you can still apply to jobs, but you're actually getting on your LinkedIn, you're getting messages from recruiters asking you if you're interested in positions. And the payoff is just so great. I think, and I agree 100% with what Joanne was saying. Local business is a great idea. That's a really, really great idea. And I'm sure that there would be a lot of struggling local businesses that can't afford a UX designer that would be really happy to have you help them.
Thank you, Lacey. Yeah, doesn't that feel good, right? When you get to that other side, once actual recruiters start reaching out to you, right? Because
it's a really great ego boost too. Like, it really builds your confidence.
Yeah, because we've seen so many people go through this transition. It's really like, at first it feels like something so hard and so impossible, but then once you're, land that first job, or, build up some experience, right? And then you kind of, in this much better position when they start reaching out to you, and then they start competing for you at some point once you build up lots of experience, right? So I think, Jenny, you're saying something too.
Oh, or Maggie want to say something, I can go after her.
Cool.
I would just say, like, in looking for pro bono work, specifically, like, you probably want a company that has a website. Most do, but they definitely need to have a website or an app, ideally, like something that you can work with. And also, I would say, like, don't worry so much about doing the entire process, right? If they just need like one page on their website redesigned so that it's a better user experience, and you can do wireframes and low fidelity prototype, but you can show that you know how to use Figma, for example. Like, that's a valuable addition. So I would not discount that case study just because it doesn't start from the absolute ground up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie.
I actually totally agree. I definitely agree, because I also agree with Joanne mentioned about find your neighborhood, because I do have experiences that one of my internship is my aunt's best friend, which is also my neighborhood. He actually run a small IT company which helps all those nonprofit organization to make a donate software. It's like a to-be software. So all those nonprofit organizations are going to buy their software, and then they're going to use that to create a donation page. And then what I did for that internship is I just designed the donation page. Not entire. They have like a huge software, but I only designed that part. And then the benefit is you will get some data point after a launch, which is super useful for your portfolio because recruiter or hiring manager, they love to see your result. Like before we actually, we don't have this audience, but after the design launch, boom, how many audience coming, or like they like to see the numbers. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, and that side is definitely better, right? Because some people make the mistake of just sitting and applying, right? They took some course or boot camp or whatever, right? They don't have any real projects, and they just we cannot blame you, right? Because that's the conventional way that we're told we're supposed to start a career, right? But then the problem is you learn and learn and learn and learn, and then you get stuck because nobody wants to hire you, or like very few companies want to hire you because you don't have any of that experience. So doing even some of those smaller projects, right? Volunteer and doing pro bono work, it's great if you can find a bigger project with more phases, right? And that's actually what's great about volunteering, right? Or pro bono, because you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have more leverage, right? So if they're not paying you, you have more say. You can kind of negotiate, oh, maybe we can do this and this and that, right? And cover a few phases, because obviously, right, you can do, a small project or just like one phase, but ultimately, if you have choice, right, why not do a big and comprehensive one? Because ultimately, that will be even, make you even much more marketable afterwards. So, and I think Bruce is also asking, can you share some portfolios that are good examples? So Bruce, what we will actually do is we have a whole event recording on our site in the resources section, where I think it's called How to Create an Effective Portfolio, right? And that talks more about the actual creation of the portfolio, how to structure case studies, right? Not like where to take them from, right? And where to build the experience. And there are a few examples in that recording. So you can take a look, and we can reach out maybe a little bit later, and then we can share the link to that, but it's easy to find it. We only have like a few, like maybe 5 recording videos there. So it's the one called How to Create an Effective Portfolio. So what I also wanted to ask you guys, what are your thoughts on what makes a great case study that actually stands out and makes it appealing to employers, in your opinion?
I think something that really showcases your personality, because they also want to work with you as a person as well. So something that showcases your personality, don't make it very generic or look like 50 other case studies that they've seen before. You could even put a little bit of humor in there. Also, what I mentioned earlier, make them care immediately. If they have to scroll halfway down the page before you show them the value that you provided with the project, they might never see it, because a lot of these recruiters will spend 5-10 seconds looking at your case study, and they might only look at one and did not even bother looking at the other ones. So you want right from the beginning, in some kind of really big, easy to find way that it's shouting at you to showcase the value that you were able to bring. You increased this by 50%, you increased sales by 10% with your solutions, or some kind of something that businesses are going to look at and say, oh, wow, I want them to do that for my business. They clearly bring a lot of value. And I think that's what really gets their attention and gets them interested in you, by seeing not necessarily what you've done in general, but what you've done for the company.
Thank you, Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on strong case studies that stand out?
I have a recommendation for presenting case studies. As someone who sat when conducted a number of interviews myself, a lot of the time, especially if you have half an hour or even 45 minutes, just as much as you possibly can. You want to tell a story, absolutely. But try to get your big points out earlier and pay attention to the people who are interviewing you, because if they start asking you questions and you've been telling your story for a while, take a pause, answer their question, and then ask them, do you want me to continue? Happy to skip ahead. Because a lot of the time I've seen people like, you ask them a question and then they will just jump back into the story, and they're very like vigilant about continuing the story, when what the interviewer really wants to start doing is asking questions and finding out, okay, what role did you play in this part? I actually, one interview that I was the interviewee in, I made that exact mistake and was just pressing on too much, and they ended up saying, okay, actually that's plenty. We can just skip to questions now. So just staying like really tuned in and make sure that you're prioritizing what the interviewer wants to know is super important.
Thank you, Maggie. What else? Really want to go deep on this one, because that's really key. Your case studies, right, is basically what ultimately gets you hired, right? Your portfolio, like probably the most important part along with real experience. So any other thoughts on what makes a case study very effective, what makes it stand out and gets you noticed, and then, employers really like it?
Yes, it is really important, because you're going to have to talk through that when you're in the interview. Therefore, you're going to really need to be able to be comfortable with the work that you did. So that's where the documentation comes in. And of course, and I mentioned it in one of the other questions, if you can do some practice with yourself, that would be good as well. This way you really drill in what, the steps in the storytelling, as Jenny was talking about, of your case study. Another important thing is being able to understand the design process and how it got started. So if you follow that process or that method, you will be, I would suggest for you to be able to set up your portfolio case study in that manner. That way it tells a seamless story, right, from beginning to end. Now, here's really something really important that I learned here at Beginnings. It doesn't matter if it's messy or ugly, as long as it's part of the story and it gets you from point A to point B. Meaning, nothing has to be polished. And actually, employers have mentioned that they don't want anything perfect. They want to be able to see the process of your thinking. So just make sure that you're able to reflect that in your case study organization and structure.
Thank you, Joanne. Great points. So I want to take, I think Maggie, did you have some more insights on this?
Just something really quick. I thought of a very specific thing. Make sure that it's set up so that someone can read through it and go into detail on things that they are interested in, but like put headlines on everything, like put in big, bold text, one sentence, big takeaway, so they can kind of jump through the story. And then it's really helpful when you're actually in an interview, because then you can move quickly through it, or you can highlight specific things that you think are particularly relevant to that company, and you're not stuck kind of reading through every single step.
Yeah, those are great points. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Maggie. I think another tip is a mistake that some people make is just not having some kind of executive summary at the top of the case study that you're put together, right? Because again, as many hiring managers told us, sometimes they have a very quick lunch break and they have to review 30 portfolios. So they only may have a few seconds to take the first pass and kind of identify the most interesting ones, right? So you want to be able to, you want to UX the portfolio creation process, and you want to think about those users and what their goals are and how to best present your case studies and your portfolio, right? And give them a summary at the top, give them a very clear structure and outline of everything. etc. So Brad was asking, what are the best methods to use when companies are concerned that a candidate does not have enough real-world UX experience working on a team with engineers, developers? So just to take a first stab at that, I honestly do not think, I mean, you can talk your way through it. You basically just need to try to get that experience in some way, right? And try to, maybe even if you're volunteering, right, you can get an engineer to collaborate with you, right? And, or at least talk to them and basically have some of that collaboration experience and prepare your work for the handoff, right? So you can actually talk about it. And so instead of, I mean, you need to build yourself up in that regard, right? If employers are looking for that. Sometimes you may be able to get away from that too, right? Not every employer will ask you lots about developers, right? But it's a lot will. So I'll let you guys provide your insights on this question. And to repeat the question, right? Just when employers are concerned of you not having experience collaborating with the team, especially with like engineers and developers, how do you address that? How do you go about that?
I would say if you're changing a career, try and bring as much from your old career into it. So like maybe you haven't collaborated with engineers and developers, but maybe you could speak to, oh, in my old job as a healthcare worker, I had to collaborate with nurses and doctors all the time, and we were put under a lot of stress where we had to solve a problem really quickly and work together. Because I think one of the biggest things that they want to look for, that they want you to have, is that you're able to collaborate well. So maybe, yes, like it would be great if you had experience collaborating more with engineers and developers, but the fact that you can collaborate well with all different kinds of people could speak to that. And then also, as Michael said, the best, it's kind of hard to talk your way out of that. Like you can give examples from your experience, but sometimes the best thing is to just try and go and get that experience and reach out to developers and try and collaborate with them. And, but if you can tie anything that you've done before to collaboration and working through a problem together, I think that would be helpful.
And in particular to fashion design, the way that I tied in my past professional experience with UX, for example, you have, as a designer, you have to work with tech designers and you have to work with, fabric designers and salespeople. So that experience in itself, from that understanding, right? And if you were to showcase that in a UX context, you're able to present to the employer that you can work with individuals from different departments, right? And that you're able to negotiate, right? It's not just design. It's about everyone making the right decision for the product. So that's what I did. I brought a lot of my experience of myself working with these other departments and tied it back to UX.
Thank you, Joanne.
And then for the questions that if you don't have experiences working with the developers and how you're going to interview or something like that, I think my suggestion is trying to think why they ask that questions. Usually they will ask, like, have you have a experience work with the front-end engineer? And then when they ask that one, actually they're trying to ask, how do you hand off your design project to developers? And then if you don't have these experiences, I think that's fine. Just trying to research that, how do you hand off the design file to developers? What does the developers want to look at it? Usually I will write down all the like interaction states and then write some like suggestions or feature, what kind of feature was that. So just think, I feel like you need to think about it in the developer way. And also I can recommend this book. I know some company, they use Lean design or like Agile design. I highly recommend Lean UX. So you will understand how you're going to work with developers and then what's the entire process. Because usually as a UX designer, you need to follow their agile process or sprint. In my company, it's 2-week sprint. So developers has 2 weeks to develop stuff. And then we also have sprint to design stuff. And then we hand off to them. They have 2 weeks to develop it. So I highly recommend this book. So you get to know how to work with engineer, something like that. If you know some front-end coding, that would be much, much more better. But it's not necessary, but it's good to understand something. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, guys. Yeah, great points on this. Also, how many case studies did you actually have in your specific portfolio when you landed your first job? So based on your experience, how many case studies do you think one typically needs to get a UX job? Very popular question.
I only had 2 when I landed my first job, but I'll say that like I mentioned previously, I got hired on as a contractor with Dell first, and then got hired on full-time later once they saw how I worked. And I'd say if you're trying to get hired with less than 3, contract positions are a really great place to get started, to get your foot in the door, because companies don't have to take the same risk that they have to take when they hire you on full-time, because you're working a lot of the times, they can just drop your contract at any time and not have to pay unemployment or pay a severance or anything like that. So it's a lot easier for them to take a chance on a junior employee who might not have as many case studies as they would like. So I think that I got lucky in that regard. And one of my case studies, it was a little bit difficult because there was a non-disclosure agreement. So I couldn't really show specific artifacts on it. So that was another reason why, I think applying to contract positions was really in my benefit, because they really were willing to, take the risk. Like, hey, we interviewed her. She seems like she could do a really good job. And if it doesn't work out, then, oh, well, we'll just drop her. But obviously I'm a really hard worker, and I worked I don't know if I'm allowed to curse. I worked my ASS off, and they saw that, and I ended up getting hired on full time. Yeah.
Thank you, Lacey.
You're welcome.
I think when I applied a junior position, entry-level job, I have 3 projects. 2 are real world, and 1 is my personal project. And then both 2 real world projects are actually from bootcamp, and 1 is from beginnings. So it's really helpful, I would say that. And I also think 3 is pretty enough, because usually recruiter or hiring manager, the maximum project they're going to look at is 2. The 3rd one is just in case. But I feel like 3 is definitely enough. But the most important is still need to have some real world project. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Maggie, Joanne.
I believe I had 2, and I believe I had 3 at first. And then as I was doing my interviews and, just talking to recruiter after recruiter after recruiter, I realized maybe I just need to concentrate on 2 and make them really strong. So I went back. It's an organic process. You go back and you change things, and you keep perfecting it. Kind of like an oil painting where you go back. You can always make it better, but then just realize when you have something good and something strong. So 2, I think, is good, but they have to be strong and reflect the solution to the problem.
And I had 3. One was from a boot camp, 1 was from BeginX, and then 1 was very extensive. So I think, I think Joanne, I agree. I think it's good to have at least 3, probably to tick off the boxes, but you're probably only going to talk about 1. So 1 or 2. So I think you want to be really well versed in one or two. Because one of mine was something I'd worked on for like 6 months, pretty much with one other person, and we did everything from research to high fidelity prototypes and presenting to potential investors. So, and that's really the only thing I needed, I think.
Thank you, Maggie. So I also wanted to come back to, I know, and thank you guys for answering a lot of the questions in the chat and writing here. I also want to bring some of those for discussion here. So Joseph Kenny was asking, how would you use past work experience in the resume when coming from an unrelated field? What sort of skills should be highlighted from those past jobs when applying to UX jobs? And I think Joanne provided a great answer here, some great tips. I'd love to hear from others as well.
The nice thing about UX is everything at the end of the day is a user experience. So you can talk about shaping, if not a website or a mobile app, you can talk about your role in shaping an experience around the people who use it. And you can in a resume, like, just talk about your role in maybe like convincing upper management to pay more attention to something that involves user experience. Collaboration, teamwork, cross-disciplinary work too is valuable. Working with, like, for example, I worked at the New York State Department of Health, but I facilitated a bunch of work, like community working groups, and I really honed in on that, and my experience kind of interviewing and doing, like, having one-on-one or group interactions with stakeholders.
Thank you, Maggie. I think Jenny, you were saying something too.
Oh yeah, I was trying to say that the way I categorize all my different projects, I use 3 categories. One is the industry. The second is the I would say like to B or to C or like to G, to government. And then the third one is internship, full-time, or capstone project. I use that 3 category and then I add that as my subtitle in my cover of my portfolio. So when the recruiter, they browse my website, they will immediately know that, okay, this one is for healthcare industry. Okay, this one is for like a sustainability charity, and this one is for AI company, something like that. So because I usually apply like 100 of companies, sometimes I don't know what they're looking for. But if they have like some website needed or healthcare needed or e-commerce needed, they will immediately notice that, okay, what kind of portfolio they want to look at. They're gonna help. It's gonna helpful for my company, something like that. So I highly recommend that put those little subtitle or little title under in your cover, like a small text, so they will notice that immediately. That's one suggestion. And then the second one, usually I'm all of my projects like in different platform or format. Some of them, like I say, is website, some of them is mobile, and then some of them is mobile web. So everything's different, and then all the UI interface should be different, and all the UI rules should be different as well. So I think that may be helpful if like recruiter trying to see if you have the ability to do responsive website or just mobile web, something like that. Or maybe Apple Watch or AR, like John mentioned before. Maggie mentioned before, or some, I don't know, equipment interface design. So trying to put some, at least have some diversity, but not too diversity, because then you will have no focus. But maybe just put one, like a creative if you have, like you can put one like creative UX UI project. Like I actually put a conversational UX project in my portfolio. It's like Alexa. We use like a voice bot to create some interface. But eventually I feel like maybe it's not helpful for my job searching because I don't want to be a conversational UX designer. But there are some recruiters say that this is interesting, and then we see you have like a enthusiasm and passion to discover other platforms. So I think that might be a good choice that if you have time, you can create something like that.
Thank you, Jenny. This is good. Yeah, so we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to ask you guys a few more quick questions and take a couple of questions from the audience as well to make sure that we answer as many as possible, and then we'll have to wrap up relatively soon. What were your biggest mistakes and lessons related to UX portfolios and case studies?
Mine was, and I know I'm a broken record at this point, but mine was not making them care right at the beginning and having just too much too much text and just too much that they would just never go through in such a limited amount of time, and just making sure, like it's just taking too long to get to the point. Like, luckily I noticed that pretty early on and remedied it, but I definitely think it makes a big difference to make sure. And also, as I said, having too much text, also make sure that you pair things with pictures and show real artifacts and things like that. I don't know if that's a mistake people often make, but pictures they really help break up the content.
Thank you, Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and speaking about picture, I think I recommend that you can put some picture about teamwork. Like me and Lacey, we're grouped together, and then we take a screenshot that we're in a meeting, and then we're doing all those sticky notes. I think that one is great to put in your website. Also, if the people that you interview with, they agree, you can also put some of them of their like a screenshot of their video. Put onto your website, and then I also agree that don't put too much text on your portfolio. Add some picture. I personally recommend using the zigzag layout so their eyeballs will follow it. There's like some article talk about that, but I recommend using that layout. It's more attractive. And then one takeover I got from like a higher level UX designer is sometimes if you pass the recruiter's level and then the recruiter pass your portfolio to hiring manager, sometimes they're really professional. And then they will really look at your design very carefully. And then their eyes are actually really picky, and then they can notice that immediately that your pixel is like moved a little bit left or right. So I feel like it's really important that make sure everything of your design is going to be neat, like a pixel rule, and then don't just make some very obviously mistake that the hiring manager going to notice immediately. Because I don't know, they have like a really picky eyes. They can just notice that immediately. So yeah, I recommend look at some materialdesign.com. They have some great UI content. So because that's the basic, even though you want to focus on UX, somehow you're still going to do some of the UI, and then they really care about those basic. So you can have time to look at materialdesign.com to learn about those UI knowledge.
And I just wanted to say one real quick thing from what Jenny said. If your portfolio does get passed up to a hiring manager and they don't go with you, always ask them why and what you could do better. Like, that's how you can get some really good portfolio feedback. But anyway, sorry, Joanne, I'll let you go.
No worries. That's good. Joanne, Maggie, what were some of your biggest mistakes and lessons about portfolios and case studies?
I think one of One of the tips that I can give is definitely record yourself, right? This is actually a trick that we learned here at Beginnex, and I felt like it really helped because that way you're able to take a look at yourself, right? And make some notes on where you need to practice, whether it's your vocabulary that you're using, or if, you know, you're stopping too much, or there's like weird silent pauses. Definitely do that, because once you start interviewing, you know, you're going to be a little stressed out and a little, you know, what is it? A loss of words, like I am right now, right? So definitely be able to practice that. Make it natural, you know? So that's why I had mentioned before, like, just really dive into your notes, right? And make sure that you understand the process that you just went through, right? And be able to practice that, record yourself, and as Jenny had mentioned before, make sure that you create some sort of like script, right, of a storytelling, so you can do it. And also, you can learn this here as well, where, you know, you can see how long it takes you to do say something about your case study in 5 minutes versus 10 minutes versus 15 minutes, right? So that way you know what areas to focus on and what other details are not as important. So that was definitely something that the more that I interviewed, the more that I realized, and the more that I was able to fix along the way.
Thank you, Joanne.
I already shared one of one of my mistakes, which is just having a story, being too committed to the story, and not having a short version. But I will say something I think that was really weak about my portfolio when I applied was that, and sometimes, you know, the UI you work on is, the interface isn't always under your control. But I didn't have very much mobile material, and a lot of, at least design agencies, are mobile first. Like 70 or 80% of a lot of websites' traffic is mobile. So we, you know, at iCrossing, we design mobile first and then translate that into desktop. So if you can show, if you have control over that, I would strongly recommend like bringing forward work on mobile interface.
Thank you, Maggie. So whatever wasn't covered yet in this question, right? Because I really, once again, it's always a balance between like going for too long, right? But that, or going, you know, discussing everything and kind of at a too surface level. But if you haven't mentioned this yet, what are your top 3 things that you would highlight that make a portfolio effective?
I can say one of them, the ratio between strong images that capture somebody's attention to how much text you have. As Michael had mentioned before, a lot of these recruiters and hiring managers are seeing resume after portfolio, and, you know, their eyes become tired. So I guess after taking this course and learning more about this industry, I started looking at life as a UX case study for everything. So think about who your audience is. Think about, be empathetic to them, and make sure that the most important things, those big moments in your case study that you were like, aha, so this is where we switched, pivoted. I need to highlight that. Make sure that you can highlight that somehow on your case study, whether it's by color or you're working on the layout, whatever it is that you feel as a designer, right, that you can emphasize. Make sure you emphasize on those big points.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Joanne.
definitely. I definitely agree with that. And don't be afraid to I think we mentioned this before, but to say bad things, or to say that you made a mistake. You could say, like, this is what I thought that the client wanted, but come to find out, this is what they actually wanted. And that's so telling when you can explain how you navigated that situation and still had a successful outcome. That is something, it doesn't make you look bad. That's something that makes you look really impressive. And I think a lot of people are afraid to put in the mistakes or the hard parts or things that were frustrating. But as in the UX design field, it's all around empathy. And we want to hear about a real experience with mistakes that were overcome, and not just like the perfect happy path, amazing things that happened. Like we really want to know, okay, so what went wrong and how did you solve it?
Thank you, Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say having your case studies be concise is really important, because that's a big part of UX is the UX of copywriting and knowing how to give clear instructions when you're designing a page. And it just shows basic communication skills. So having something, you want your case study to be concise and action-oriented and outcomes-oriented, and outcomes include learnings and mistakes.
Yeah. And then I also want to add one more thing is really need to clarify your role, because really, if it's hiring a manager, they really care about what you did. Sometimes you're gonna work with other team members. They're gonna be UX researcher, UI designer, but they really want to know what you did. What's your role in this group? Because sometimes we're gonna put all of our project inside, and then they're gonna confuse the hiring manager. What did you did? I have been asked that questions, and I said I actually did UX and UI, and then they say, okay, I got it. But really, you can, if you I think I personally really suggest that you can put your role at the very beginning, with time, and then with platform, and then the background, and go together. Yeah, that's one of my suggestions.
And I
Thank
just
you,
have
Meg.
one more-
Thank you,
Sorry.
Jenny and Maggie. Yeah, Joanne, please.
Just one more thing.
Of course.
So one of the key. Sorry, I'm so tired from a long week at work. I apologize, guys. But one of the key things to remember is why. Why did you do this? Why did you make this change? Why did you decide to go there? Because that will explain and show your critical thinking skills. And as Lacey has said, even if you make mistakes along the way, that's fine. I believe it was Google's mentality in their team is fail hard, right? And fail fast so that you're able to get up again and try again. So failing is not a bad thing, as long as you're able to have an open mind and, work, within a team, and be able to have empathy for your teammates and be able to have respect for them as well, because everybody has something great to bring onto the board.
Thank you, Joanne. Yeah, that's a great point as well. So we're almost out of time, but I want to also take maybe one or two questions more from the audience before we share the handout with you guys and tell you more about our own offering as well. So Holly is asking, how did you guys highlight pro bono work on your resume? Did you list it as job under freelance title or maybe a consultant title? So how did you guys go about that?
I listed it as a job because it is. I mean, even though you weren't paid, if you helped a business solve some type of problem or create a website or improve their sales or in any type of way with UX design, that's a job. And I put mine as I didn't put freelance on my resume, but if I was asked in an interview, I would tell them, yes, this was freelance. But I put UX consultant, and I would recommend anyone, you don't need to put it in a separate section. If you did a UX project with a real business, I don't see why you couldn't list that as a job along with all of your other jobs.
Thank you, Lacey. Yeah, that's a great point. It's basically work is work, right? So you can, we usually recommend, basically, if you were a consultant, you were a pro bono consultant, basically that's what you can put, right? If you were a freelancer, you can put that. It's much more important rather than like what type of like administrative contract you had, right? It's like, did you actually do that type of work with a real company, with real people, with developers, with the team, etc., right? That's the most important part, right? But it's, yeah, you can typically say UX consultant or like a pro bono consultant or a contractor or freelancer, right? Depending on like what the work was exactly. What did you guys, how did you guys go about that? Maybe we'll take one more answer from someone.
I think when I applied the job, I put 2 of my pro bono. One is internship because they give me the internship paper, even though it's pro bono. But for all the bootcamp or the beginnings project, I put contractor. But it's all under the experiences. In my resume, there's experiences under beginning, the company name, and then contractor, and then some other internship. But after I got a full-time job, I changed that to project right now. Because at that time, I don't have any experiences, but I feel like it is a job because we have a real client and we have a real teammate.
Awesome. So last question we'll take from Isa, or maybe is it Isa? So correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I think so. Joanne answered that in the chat, but I also wanted to like bring that up here as well because that's a pretty common question that we get as well. Is it important to discover an industry in which you would like to work as a UX professional? You guys think it's important to like focus and identify that in advance, or can you just basically apply for all types of UX roles and all UX industries? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important. I mean, I don't know if everyone would feel this way, but it's nice to work in an industry that you believe in and that you like. So because I had learning experience design background and I really believe in education and I like the field, I tried to look for things in ed tech. It doesn't mean that was the only thing I applied for. I definitely applied for other industries. But I think personally, I feel like the first thing is be happy, and the second thing is make money and have a job. So I don't know, I would say pick an industry that you like and definitely focus on that. And then of course have backups and apply to other areas as well. But you know, like this is your life, you know, if you're interested in something, go for it.
Thank you, Lacey.
Yeah,
and it's still the business that's like, I couldn't agree more. And it's also the business that's interviewing you at the end of the day. Like they want a UX designer, right? But they also want someone who cares about their business. And if it's an industry that you feel passionate about, or that you have to at least be interested if you're going to work full-time on UX projects for this company in this industry. Or you could do what I did and work at a design agency, and then you get to move around and work on a whole bunch of different projects across different industries.
Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, that's definitely very important, right? You obviously want to try to do what you love and what you like as much as possible. And that said, you also, that's like another related common question that we commonly get. So you don't have to really tailor your portfolio and all of your case studies to a specific industry, right? So unlike some other roles or professions in UX, it's a little bit easier to move around, right? It's much more important to actually have UX skills and UX experience kind of as the function that you can do, rather than a specific industry or sector, even though that can be important too, but it's much easier to move around in UX, right? And we had grads who go to, you know, all different types of industries, and maybe they worked in ed tech during the program and then did something else, and then they got into fintech, right? So it's definitely, don't worry too much about that. Like, don't worry about tailoring your portfolio or case study to a specific industry, because that's not necessarily always, basically, you don't always have to do. Awesome. So hope you guys enjoyed the event. So let me also quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you guys. I'm sure you guys already have like lots of questions with everyone talking about it. So basically what BeginX is, right? It's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition UX without quitting their jobs, right? So we ran multiple cohorts, helped over 120 or more probably people by now transition into UX. The alumni have been of the program have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, ABC News, Facebook, or Meta, JP Morgan, many others. So recently, we have also been ranked by SwitchUp as the best UX program as well. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, The Economist, and many others. Who the program is best for, right? So the program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments that they have. We're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. What you gain after completing the program is you build not just the hard skills, but the critical softer skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and get ready to land a UX job. And in fact, because the grads have done so well, we offer a money-back guarantee as well. So you land a UX job or you get your tuition back, plus an extra $200 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more at beginx.com. Also, anyone who attended this particular event will be able to get a $400 tuition credit if you accept it. To claim that credit, what you need to do is by tomorrow, so by this Friday, go to the website and request a free, no commitment career transition consultation, or you could just request program info or just apply. And just to give you more background, so these consultations are designed to be not just some kind of like a sales pitch, but provide an opportunity for you to actually learn about UX career transition, best practices and pitfalls to avoid, get guidance, personalized advice, and ask questions about your own UX career switch and how the program can potentially help you and understand if you may be a good fit for the program, okay? So we frequently run different types of events. We'll keep you guys updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent out every few weeks or so, where we aggregate lots of virtual events so you guys can get some of those valuable resources. I want to thank you guys so much for joining and thank our wonderful speakers for all the valuable insights that you guys shared. It was a huge pleasure to have you here. If anyone has any other questions, we'll probably hang around for just a few more minutes and then we'll wrap up. All right. And I'm gonna check the Q&A tab and the chat to see if there are any like additional last minute questions about anything that anyone wants to answer. And meanwhile, if any of our speakers have any additional tips or guidance for the folks in the audience, please feel free to share.
I highly recommend just looking into UX best practices because it makes up for a lot of, it's all based in incredible research, and there's a very surprising amount of information out there, so you don't have to learn everything from your own research. I think the more well-versed you are in certain best practices, the better. Even if it's not for an interview, it will prepare you for a UX job.
Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, and a lot of people are saying thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for joining. Patricia, Pamela, Shannon, thank you, Carlin. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say too, as just a final tip, if you're starting from the ground up learning UX design, try and find a structured curriculum because it can be really overwhelming just Googling things. So I highly recommend, Interaction Design Foundation is incredible. I highly recommend them, but there's so many out there. Don't try and do it all on your own. Like, have some kind of structured curriculum that walks you through everything.
Thank you, Lacey. Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, that's what I've spoken with so many people by now, like hundreds of people, and that's the thing. You can often learn everything. All the content is available online for free, right, or very cheaply, right? So it's not really the content, right? So sometimes depends on your initiative. So it's possible to make this career transition completely on your own, right? You don't even have to like go to any courses or boot camps or anything, right? But the problem is you can get stuck, and as Lacey said, Googling all this stuff along the way can take a long time, right? So that's just basically can drag on your progress for a very long time. And actually, to be honest with you, very few people actually are able to complete this completely on their own, right? So it's basically important to keep that in mind. So any other last minute questions? Let's see, I don't think I see any new ones. Any other tips? Maggie, you're gonna say something?
Oh, I was gonna say I have to hop, but thank you so much. Also, really, I mean, BeginX was an awesome program, so I recommend it. If you,
I agree.
I really do. I mean, it gets you experience. There's structure, and they help you figure out your portfolio, and they give you a real case study with a real business. It just works pretty well. So on that note, I will jump off.
Thank you, Maggie.
Really
Really appreciate it. All right, let's wrap things up. See you guys later.